Hi, everybody. Welcome to Junction Reads. This is our second event of 2023, and I am very excited to have Dan K. Wu here with us to talk about his collection of short stories, TAOBAO. Before we officially get started, I'm going to share a land acknowledgement with you. Dan is also joining us from Toronto. He's at Ryerson, I think, right now. Dan, are you? Maybe. Junction Reads
I'm in
exists in
Toronto.
Toronto, which for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe, including the Chippewas and the Mississaugas of the Credit. It is still home to many Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island, and we are very grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on their territory. Dan K. Wu, welcome to Junction Reads.
Thank you so
Thanks
much,
for joining us
Allison.
today.
Thank you.
I am so excited to talk to you about TAOBAO, your collection of short stories from Wolsak and Wynn. It was an endeavor, I think, is a positive word for how challenging and beautiful and perfect all of these stories were. But before we dive into TAOBAO, I'd love to steal some ideas from you and find out what you're reading currently.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks, Allison. Thank you, Kaylee, for having me. It's so fun to be invited to these events. I just want to say, first of all, we're just talking about this behind the scenes. So it is so exciting to be a part of this. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for organizing it and everything. So I did actually bring a whole stack of books. So I've been going through Daniel Scott Tisdale's short story collection. It's an incredible collection, experimental. He has like graphs and all kinds of incredible things in here. Wave graphs. I'm not sure what they're called, but it's really interesting reading. Let me see. And I've got Katie Welch's book.
Yes.
She was actually just down the street yesterday. No, sorry, it was on. I think it was on Wednesday last week.
Mhm.
She was at Innis College at U of T, um, and it just happened that there was a snowstorm on that day. So I wasn't able to go, but I really hope it went well. And that's her book is about bees. I think everyone knows. And I really like environmental books. She wrote a book about bears before. I talked to her about that before, and the bears in the book sort of come to life. Like it's just a story about bears, and it's really interesting. Let me see what else I have here. I'm trying to get all the local books. I have a book. It's actually a comic book.
Oh, nice. The
Series of
craft. Yeah.
yeah. It's called
Sloth.
Super Life on the Hill. So
Oh,
this is by three Canadian comic artists, Durchansky, Kim, and Y, I think. But it's really interesting writing about. Uh, this is sort of like biographical comics, and I've been reading comics for a long time, and so this is a really great collection. See what else I have. Um, I have a huge copy of this. I think it's a biography of Jack McClelland, the publisher.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Canadian publisher. So it I like to read biographies. I basically like to read anything, anything I can get my hands on. But this is really it's really well written. It's like got all the sorts of history about Canlit and how the industry started. And James King has done a lot of these sorts of biographies. I think he's really, he really knows how to make a good book.
Yeah.
This is a book I found. I live downtown in Toronto, so I'm always walking around, and they have the little book houses. You know,
Mhm.
uh, like people just put books in there, and then you walk by and you can take them. So I found this one,
Wow. You
and
found that
I
in a
hadn't.
little library?
Yeah, he's Richard Wright. So I'd never heard of him. I mean, there's so many authors out there. I try to read a lot, but I'd never heard of him. And I thought, oh, well, this is obviously a very famous book. You can just tell by like reading the back cover. And it just blew me away. It is incredible. I mean, it's about he's an African American writer, but his writing is really it's really something. It's something that is I don't really come across books like that. Here's another one. This is called Revenge of the Mooncake Vixen, and it's by a poet actually. This is her only piece of fiction, and it's a sort of a collection of short prose pieces, like prose poetry even. It's very I don't know how to describe it. It's just I've read basically all Chinese Canadian fiction I can find, and this I'm always looking for something that is just way out there. It's like totally off the charts, and so this I would recommend this one. Uh, it's about two sisters, and uh, they're Chinese food delivery girls, and they go around delivering Chinese food, and it's basically like it's very graphic, and it's not for the faint of heart, let's say. Okay,
Right up my
so
alley then.
and what else do I have? I think that's about it. Of course, I bought this at a used bookstore in Toronto. Every time I see a Japanese book somewhere, I pick it up right away and I say, I read the first sentence, and usually I'll like it. And so this was $2 at a local. I think they were right east of Christie on Bloor. Uh, yeah, around there. Um, but yeah, this one is his very first book. He won the Nobel Prize,
Mhm.
uh, Ishiguro, and he wrote this when he was, I think it was for his master's. Um, he was in university in Bristol, maybe. I'm not sure which school, but uh, I mean, for a first book, like this is just
Yeah.
it. Just you read this, and either you're inspired or you never want to write again. I mean, it's like you'll never come, be comparable to that. So that is just incredible. Um,
But
and
it
that's it.
definitely
That's all I have.
explains why he won the Nobel Prize. That was his first
Yeah,
book, and then everything else that came after.
yeah, and all his books are so different.
Yeah.
I've read some of his other books, and this one is a little different, I think, from his other ones. But it takes place in Japan, and it's like post-war. Uh, it's really it's really like nightmarish. I found it very scary. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Kaylee just copied and pasted your list in the chat,
Oh,
which is
thank you,
so
Katie.
exciting because I also get that list sent to me, which is which
Oh,
is
okay.
awesome. I am excited to read or to hear you read from TAOBAO, which is a collection of short stories from Wolsak and Wynn. But before I do, I'm going to share your biography with everyone, if that's okay.
Thank you. Sure.
Dan K. Wu is the author of the novel Learning How to Love China, which won the Ken Klonsky Award in 2018. It will be reissued this year by Wolsak and Wynn as The Little Comrade. He is the editor of an upcoming short story anthology from ECW, The Spirits Have Nothing to Do with Us, New Chinese Canadian Fiction. His writing has appeared in such publications as the South China Morning Post, Quill Quire, China Daily USA. TAOBAO is his first collection of short stories, and it was also published from Wolsak and Wynn. Wu's family came to Canada in the 1970s. His grandfather was a fire captain and the first firefighter to die on duty in British Hong Kong, partly as a result of the British colonial system. A Toronto native, he lives with his partner in the city and occasionally teaches at the University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies, and he is currently studying at the Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst and SANS Institute. Is that still
Thank
true?
you, Allison.
Is that still true? Are you
Oh,
still studying? I took it
no,
from
I actually graduated from that program last December last year. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
very
It
nice.
was a very nice program, a very good program.
Yeah, it
Um,
sounds like it would be intense.
yeah, yeah, it was very intense. Um, if anybody wants to talk to me about cybersecurity, I'm happy to have another chat about that. Um, I wanted to mention, so the anthology is actually being published by Wolsak and Wynn, so
Mhm.
not ECW. I
Oh,
think that might have been what you said, or maybe I misheard. Um,
but the anthology?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
what it was. I read that Jen Suk Fong Lee was the editor. I think that's where I got that from.
Oh, okay. Oh, maybe that's what you said. So maybe I misheard it.
No, I didn't. I did say ECW. My fault.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
That's
Okay,
okay.
so
2 new fantastic books coming in 2023 from Wolsak and Wynn.
yeah, right. And the anthology, as the editor, I really don't do very much. I don't know if you know very much about anthologies. I didn't know much at all about anthologies. I mean, when I started the project, and it was Paul Vermeersch who really, he's sort of just so full of ideas. I mean, you just talk to him for 10 minutes and you got 10 new ideas and 10 new projects to do. And so that was one of them. And I started on that, and it was I'm very happy that we were able to put that together. Yeah.
I'm excited to
So
read it.
yeah.
Yes, so whatever you'd like to read from TAOBAO.
Okay, great. I was gonna actually read the very first story.
Okay.
I don't have a very great track record of reading. I'm picking the right story. I I went to I think what was it? It's called the International Festival of Authors. It's on
Yeah.
Harborfront.
Mhm.
But I went down, and I hadn't even thought about which story to read, and we were doing an Instagram live, and I didn't realize the kind of festival. There are a lot of kids there, right? And so
Oh
I was
man.
just, I was having a really busy day, and so I just opened up the book and I started reading, and then I got through like halfway down the story, and I thought, oh my goodness, I should stop.
As
So,
you're looking at little kids in the audience. Oh my gosh.
well, it
Yeah.
was an Instagram live, so
Oh, right. Sorry.
we were just in an office somewhere.
I thought you had an audience there too.
No, I didn't. Yeah, it was like a last minute thing. Yeah, because okay, so I'm gonna read. The story is called "The Marriage Market," and I'm just gonna read from the computer. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So the story, well, I'll read a couple pages. The marriage market. The daughter had begun to lie to her mother, who wanted her to get married. I already have a boyfriend, the daughter said. It was believable. After all, she was slim, had fine shoulder blades and long toned limbs. Her face was neither especially like a man's or a woman's. When she put her hair up or hid it under a cap, she felt like a beautiful boy. Her hands were smooth and nice. Because of her appearance, a few men looked in her direction. Nobody told her what they wanted, but she knew from the way their eyes lingered, as if by looking they could capture a piece of her. She shivered. She had no wish to be possessed by a man. Her family were Suzhou people. After growing up, the daughter had gone to Shanghai for a year. Her mother had wanted her to come home to get married, to get Tylee, a bride price, which would help out her brother, a young baby boy. After 3 abortions, they'd finally had the son they'd been hoping for. The daughter preferred the glamour of life in Shanghai. For example, she had recently tried something called Italian gelato, a kind of rich, smooth ice cream which she loved. And although she didn't have enough money to indulge, she liked seeing the large number of beauty spas. One day I'll treat myself to a relaxing time, she whispered. Besides that, the streets were clean and she enjoyed window shopping. Just the multitude of stores and boutiques delighted her. Yes, it was different from other parts of the country she had seen, especially the countryside, where garbage was strewn everywhere around villages and village houses and roads. She couldn't stand the smelly trash and litter. But after a while, Shanghai became unpleasant too. The cost of living was too high. She couldn't land any good jobs and she didn't want to compromise herself. Some men had offered her work in questionable industries, but she didn't accept. She had walked by a storefront with dim red lights one evening on an unfamiliar street. In the shadows, a neon barber pole turned round and round. A man came out of the door, hiding his face with his hand, while a girl in heavy makeup looked out the glass window. The look on the girl's face had been both bored and unhappy. Eventually, with her mother bothering her every week to return home, she left. Of all the things she didn't like about Shanghai, it was a new city policy that made up her mind. There's a new city ordinance in effect, she said on the phone to her mother. It's garbage separation. It's so annoying. Oh yeah? We don't have it here. I can do what I want with the garbage. Throw it all over the road if I want. An auntie stands on the road watching us split up the garbage. It's so complicated, and I don't want to get a fine or thrown in jail. How does it work? You have to put the garbage in different buckets according to what it is. They have a jingle to help us remember. The daughter recited the song. If the pig can eat it, it's wet garbage. If the pig can't eat it, it's dry garbage. If piggy gets sick and dies, it's poisonous garbage. What's that all about? Asked the mother. Whose pig are you talking about? So she went home. Her mother and father were old Suzhouers who once lived in a courtyard house in the old city center. When the government took back the land, the family was given 2 sets of apartments in the suburbs. The mother worked sweeping the streets. It wasn't an upper class job, but at least it was a government job. And because they owned property, they considered themselves rich upper class people. The daughter got a job as a shop assistant. The daughter liked eating, especially watermelon and banana, even drinking cold ice water. When it was available, she would eat crab and mango. When her period came, her mother forbade her from eating these foods, which were depleting for women who were bleeding. But the daughter couldn't help herself. During her period, she craved ice cream more than ever. It was such a cold food, the mother didn't understand it. The daughter would sneak out to a shop and buy an ice cream bar or a popsicle and eat it in the alley. The mother saw her from the window and scolded her when she went inside. Who ever heard of this, eating ice cream on your period? You'll get sick. The daughter wouldn't listen, however. I'll make you a wuji soup, or do you want paigu soup? The mother asked. Everyone liked that kind of soup, and it would boost her warmth, her blood. But the daughter refused. Okay, I'll leave it there.
I was reading along. I loved this story. I was very happy when you said that you were going to read the first one.
Thanks,
Um,
Allison.
it part of what I loved about this collection was the characters just in constant maybe not need, but want, like just moving along in their lives, wanting, maybe needing something else. And that story is perfect for that. A great opening to the collection. Before we get started, I wanted to talk to you about the title. A lot of times collections have a title that is also the title of a story, but that's not the case here. And I wanted to talk to you about that. And in that seeking that I just spoke of, because TAOBAO means seeking treasure, but it's also an online shopping platform like Amazon in China. So I wanted to talk to you about the choice of title for the collection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. Let me just go back to what you were saying about the first story being the very first story. And I just want to thank Jen Sokfang Lee, the editor, because she was really the one who was able to organize the stories in that way. And I think, she was able to see which story should go first and what the order should be and how to organize the whole book. And so you were just commenting on how that was a very good lead into the collection. And I just wanted to give credit to Jen because I had no idea which
Yeah.
story should go first. As far as the title, yeah, I know that. Yeah, that's interesting what you said. Sometimes people pick the title of one of the stories and have that as the title of the whole collection. And so, what was the choice? I mean, so you're sort of asking, how did I come up with this title and why would I choose it?
Yeah, I
And
think,
I don't think, yeah.
no, sorry. I thought you were going to ask me something.
Yeah, it is hard to describe. I mean, I don't I can recall when I came up with the title, and however, I didn't give it very much thought. I mean, it just seemed I was putting all the stories together, and that was an obvious title for me because uh, you know, my understanding of China, uh, there are a couple of there are a couple of reasons why it fits, and so for example, what I wanted to one thing I want to highlight is where China has come and what society in China is like today and what life is like today. And you know, as somebody who lives in China, I think your the 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 experience is probably more is actually quite close to what I would say experiences like in elsewhere, like in Canada. I mean, people might believe that it's very different. Like it's inconceivable what life is like there under communist regime, and it's like uh, you know, the society has changed a lot. And I think the organizing factors, the organizing principles around society, wherever we are, like in contemporary society, probably have to do more so with, you know, companies like Taobao, you know, the enormous uh, corporations that sort of control how we live
Hmm.
and influence the way we live.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I want to emphasize. Um, and you know, China itself is like very diverse, and there's a lot of difference. You know, if you're living in a rural area or if you're living in an urban city, uh, the experience can be very different. But I think Taobao captures that sort of the modernity of the society,
Hmm.
at least what it's aspiring to. You know, it's questionable. Should we be aspiring to that?
Right.
You know, any country, but um, you know, for better or for worse, that's sort of uh, what what the society is sort of focused on, and using that sort of motivation as a tool to progress economically, right, technologically, and it's sort of, you know, it's very similar to what we see here, right? The sort of capital and economic factors that go into forcing people to,
Hmm.
you know, to become consumers and to work to in order to consume and to sort of get by. And you know, there's different aspects. Like, okay, Taobao is very, you know, it's very convenient. It has made life so much better in so many different ways, not just Taobao, the website, but the
Hmm.
overall development of the economy. But there are also a lot of negative factors that are well reported on.
Right.
So that's one reason. And then the other reasons, I mean, Taobao, uh, there are other reasons like the story doesn't really have that much. I mean, the book doesn't have that much to do with you know, the stories are a lot about love stories and relationships between young people, right? And they're sort of existing in this uh, country where it's uh, everybody is sort of catching on and believing that life can be much better
Hmm.
in this sort of market economy and um, capital economy, and so uh, it's really focused on the relationships between the people and the young people. And it's not, I'm not really discussing, I mean, in the other book that you mentioned, Letters to Little Comrade, I talk more about, you know, the damage and the destruction and the difficulty of living in that sort of environment, in that sort of industrial environment. And
Hmm.
I don't really address that in Taobao, but um, I wanted to write book. You know, my first one was more critical of China. You know, like it's sort of I'm writing it in the guise of the Chinese government, and so I pick on that and I take that, I go with that. But in Taobao, so I was thinking, oh, you know, I should switch sides. Every book I should pick the opposite side, and I want to present you know, society that the kind of life that we see in China that is actually you know, a lot of people are saying, oh, it reads very depressing. It's you can sort of see the poverty there. And I thought that was a funny reaction because I don't I didn't do that consciously. Like
Yeah.
I was just, I lived in China, and that's sort of what I saw, and that's sort of the life that was around me,
Hmm.
and I enjoyed living like that. Maybe I'm different, but I found it very interesting and fascinating to um, live there, and
There's a,
so I just portrayed it the way I saw it, um, and so that's sort of what I want to express, like uh, the sort of lives of ordinary people there.
yeah, I didn't feel the poverty necessarily as a kind of condition of China, but as a condition of the students and the young people, right? That they're kind of trapped, and you talk about TAOBAO and communist China. There's like this conflict of capitalism and communism, and I imagined that poverty in that they're not necessarily trying to escape it, but they're confined by it, I guess.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
in a number of stories, there are like spatially, there are moments where your characters are moving into narrow corridors, that they can barely squeeze through, sleeping in, tiny rooms with bunk beds and four other people. And so I imagined the poverty, I guess, and the condition of these students as confining. And um, I'm not sure if that's thematically what you were considering when you were writing these tight, sometimes
mhm.
inescapable places, right? Like dangerously so. There's a couple of stories where, or one story in particular where there's another exit that's been blocked off, and so all the
Right.
students who are working are kind of trapped by
Mhm,
capitalism, right? They're trapped by their boss who's put them in this living
mhm,
space as a, hey, look, you get to live for free too. Isn't this
mhm.
great? But they're also trapped there, right? They're confined
Yeah, yeah,
by
that's a good.
capitalism.
Yeah, thanks for noticing that, Alice. I mean, I did. I know what you're referring to. So Allison is talking about the story. It's the second story, the city, and there are a lot of these underground residences in, let's say, Beijing. Uh, I mean, you could find them all across the country, but hundreds of people live in these places, and there were actually news reports of fires breaking out in places like this, and people being trapped there. And the one you're talking about, so there are two sets of doors that go underground, and so somebody
Mhm.
had put all kinds of like a dozen bicycle locks and chains on the outside of this door, the double doors, and so there was really only one exit out of this place, and um, yeah, it is something. If I mean, if you saw that here, you would just scratch your head and say, "How is this possible? Like, who would be ridiculous enough to do that?" And I think the power dynamic in China, like in any society where there's a really great power imbalance, like of course we see in the U.S. I mean, all around the world, but in China, it's very unregulated. I mean, the
Yeah.
different markets are unregulated, the industries are unregulated, even labor rights, um, very wildly, and it's usually, it's nothing that we would have here in Canada.
Hmm.
So that's not, you come across that, and it seems almost normal to you that somebody would put locks on the outside of the door and block off, really the only fire exit
Hmm.
for hundreds of people.
Yeah. And the delivery boy, it was the delivery boy that I was thinking specifically. I mixed up those two in that
Oh,
when
you might be right. It might be delivery boy. Yes. Yeah.
when I said
I might be
confined.
wrong.
No,
Yeah.
because I think you're right about the other, the confined by capitalism, and you mentioned labor rights, the boss saying to him, sarcastically, well, why don't you go out and contact your union and see if they'll help you, and he has no choice but to kind of stay there. And a lot of times your characters have not necessarily regret, but this feeling of what can I do? What should I do? And trying to figure out ways of working around the expectation of what they should do. But I also thought regret played a big a big part in a lot of the stories, and in how some of them end abruptly, that we don't kind of get the justice that we want for a number of your characters. And I wanted to talk to you about that kind of regret, specifically the women who have experienced trauma, and who they are now. I wanted to talk
Yeah,
to you about
yeah.
that combination.
That theme is present even for example, I know you mentioned the woman in the stories, but for Delivery Boy as well, how the
Mhm.
story ends, right? Uh, Spoiler alert, it doesn't end well for him.
No.
And um, that sort of regret and the inevitability of being forced to the big city,
Mhm.
there's sort of this migration towards the cities, migrant workers, and there's no life, there's no means of survival really in the villages where uh, there's not really anything to do there. And so uh, we get all the young people coming to the cities, and their options, for certain, for majority of people, the options are not that great, right? And
Mhm.
so in
Yeah.
Delivery Boy, we see sort of this progression of events, and sort of the dream and the ideal, and then the brutal reality of what happens. And it's not. I don't think that story is specific to China. I mean, we see uh, labor being treated very badly, uh,
Mhm.
even in developed societies. I mean, that's it's something that we have to struggle against constantly wherever you are. And
Mhm.
I think the reason I chose China, I mean, the reason why, because obviously because I'm interested in China, I live there, but and I could see that happen very vividly in front of me. Um, and the lack of recourse for someone like that. I mean, the there are protections, like in Canada. Obviously there are protections, and those protections have been hard won over many
Mhm.
years. And people don't quite realize, China, they sort of see the glitzy lights, and they see Shanghai, they see all the beautiful buildings, but uh, that's sort of what the media portrayal is, and sort of what even the government in China wants people to see, and the U.S. government, in terms of trying to play up China's rise. They sort of want people to realize, to see that everybody is living it up, but in reality, obviously that's not the case. Um, and so on the street, you'll see scenes like that happen all over I mean, countless times. Like,
Yeah.
uh, there's just it's endless. I like you can just pick uh, any number of thousands of people, and their lives are like that. So, uh, that's sort of the regret. There is a regret there on his part, but what is the alternative? There's not really an alternative. So can we call that regret? I mean, he's making the choice to do that. And then so for the women, uh, is there a particular story that you're thinking about where the character would be regretting
I
the
think
decisions?
maybe regret isn't the right word. It's just the word that I came to when when most of your stories kind of end, right? Like there's a moving forward without resolution, I guess, is how I'm using the word regret.
Hmm,
But
hmm.
specifically, I just want to say I totally agree with you that this is not a condition. Like these stories didn't say to me, "Oh, this is how it is in China." So many of the stories were, "This is how it is for people. This is how it is for young people. This is how it is for women." Specifically, the physics problem. That
Oh,
story
okay. Yeah.
is 100% going to be a story that I remember in 20 years. Like someone will say to me, what's one of the most remarkable stories you ever read? And I will say the physics problem. That
Oh,
that because again, and again, regret's not the right word, but the character, and I can't say anything about it, the character wants so desperately to not be defined by her trauma, to escape her trauma, but her body says no. Like her body just says no. You're in this trauma. No matter what intellectually you want to do to fix your problem, you can't. And
Okay.
I felt that way only after reading The Physics Problem. I looked back and imagined all of the other stories, and that's what it says about a lot of the characters. They're kind of stuck in this situation, in this place where they can't escape, even though intellectually they think if they do one thing, they're going to get, if they stalk the blonde teacher, she's going to fall in love with them. If that, but they're stuck in this kind of cycle of denial, I guess.
Mhm.
Would you say that?
Okay, I understand, Allison.
Yeah,
it,
sorry.
it is really great. Yeah, I think, in terms of themes, I wasn't consciously thinking of portraying all these characters in that way. And, when you go through the collection, you look through each story. Yeah, I can see that. And uh, I think probably I came up with that because obviously in my own life, I have my own history
Mhm,
and decisions that, it's sort of like the fateful decision, and your life sort of goes in this direction, and or you're faced with certain circumstances, and whatever you do to change that, you cannot change it,
mhm,
and you fight against that. And I think that's sort of a universal, everybody struggles against that, and we spend our entire lives trying to uh, to come out of that,
yeah.
and inevitably we fail. And I think there's a beauty in that, like, I think it's beautiful to be able to to go against it, even despite the fact that you're not it's not gonna be a pleasant outcome, or you're not going to get the outcome that you desire.
Mhm,
That struggle is very human, and it's sort of something that I wanted to express in the book. I mean, I can see that it's there. So in terms of each story, like the physics problem, uh, I think there's other things besides that. Like there's the traditional culture,
mhm,
and sort of the roles that people are expected to play, and uh, so that is sort of a resistance against, even though your body cannot resist it, or whatever happens to you, you're faced with that, your spirit is still fighting against it. And
yeah.
that, in my point of view, I mean, that story is probably one of the more optimistic ones, because they end up she ends up understanding
Well,
what happened to her,
right.
and
Yeah.
she
Mhm,
ends up being able to actually have a course of action to deal with it. And the narrator in the story, there's some promise there of some sort of future relationship,
mhm.
and hope. Whereas there are other stories like, I think there's the professor story where the professor sort of abuses the student,
Oh my
and
gosh.
she
Yeah.
right. So I mean, in both cases, you can sort of see that the women there are facing this, they're against these odds, and uh, it's not an easy solution to deal with, especially in that kind of uh, patriarchal society.
Mhm,
And if I can say, you know, so I think the lesson that I mean, the idea that I'm trying to convey is that that struggle is valuable. That we can see it, they can see it, and see what they're doing. And it's a story that I really admire, and a sort of uh, experience that I want to capture, and I want to show people that uh, that sort of struggle is something that we need to honor, and we need to support that. And in each story, we can see that struggle, whether it's against you know the market, or it's against the cultural values that are very regressive. Uh, these are people that are, they have very strong will to live and to
mhm.
be who they want to be.
Yeah.
And uh, yeah, and we can't support them, or we cannot understand what society is like if we can't if we are able to visualize all these different stories and all these different people and their different struggles and the circumstances that are sort of repressive and oppressive, then we can come to a better understanding of what's going on there.
Mhm. I felt in my saying that it was kind of a story, characters for that anyone can kind of position themselves inside. I was also thinking about the characters not having names, right? They're in a number of the stories, the narrator is just the accountant or the student or the um, teacher. And so I imagined your decision to not name the characters, except for some of the stories where the narrator's name is Danny, but I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute as a separate question. But would you say that your decision to have these unnamed characters was because you wanted to place your readers, more closely beside
Yeah.
them or inside them?
Well, I can't take so much credit for, I'm not a very I would say I'm not a very disciplined or thoroughly trained writer, because I didn't go to, I didn't study how to write fiction.
Mhm.
And I sort of came by it accidentally. Obviously, I read a lot, so, but um, I didn't know how to write a short story, actually. This was my very first collection of short stories. And
Oh,
even the
wow.
first book is not, uh, I was just writing, I just started writing, and that's what came out. But the reason why I didn't pick names was because I had actually just read another collection of stories. It's called Shunjunners. It's by uh, E. E. Iwei. Oh, sorry, I can't remember his name. Sorry,
Kaylee
Stray
will
Iwei, I
find
think.
it.
Stray Iwei. Yeah, it's called Stray Iwei. So he's also a Canadian writer, um, and he wrote about Shenzhen, but and in his stories the characters didn't have names, I believe, or each story was named after the occupation or whatever the
Right.
main character was, and so uh, that's sort of where I got that from. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't think
I
about the implications of what effect it would have on the reader.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, it's difficult to come up with names, and Chinese names in particular in the Western audience. I mean, who's going to really remember the names if they're realistic Chinese names? I mean, even I cannot remember all the
Right.
names, so
Right.
the
I know,
meaning
and
may be
it's
lost.
it's funny the decision to use John and Kevin and Dave and like just ordinary names in some of your other stories I thought was good. I didn't put that together until we just started talking. I didn't think about the implications of unnamed characters until we just started talking about the kind of I guess division between the reader's perception of the characters as Chinese or
Yeah,
foreigners living in China. It
yeah.
just kind of it was just a thing that it popped into my head while we were talking.
It's an
But
important point, Allison, because if you look at like Western media and portrayals of visible minorities, and
mhm,
now, I mean, uh, the characters that get all the fame and glory and presence on screen time, whatever, in a
yeah,
book, the if they're the main character, usually, they're your default white character, Western character. Chinese names, Chinese people appearing in books and fiction and movies and whatnot are really, they're sort of uh, dispensable, and the
right.
names of these people are irrelevant to the reader most of the
Mhm,
time. They're just there as a sort of, stand-in for whatever, some sort of plot device or something, or some sort of comedic relief. It
right.
doesn't really have, um, that whole issue with the names there's, you can write a thesis on all the implications of that. And um, in terms of uh, the actual names and the people, I mean, it's difficult to unravel that. I mean, I would like to have the characters named, and for the names to be memorable, and then you have a whole book of characters like this. But I think
Mhm.
being able to get people to see these people, the characters, as actual human beings, is already, that's my main task, right? My main goal is to do that,
Yeah,
and I'm not going to burden the readers with names, Chinese names there.
yeah. No, I get that. It's kind of sad, but also a happy accident that the unnaming also does something else for the reader potentially.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
let's talk about the stories where Danny is the narrator. I felt reading each, I think there's three, is there three stories that have the narrator as Danny? I think there are three. And I couldn't help but think, because I know that you were a student living and you lived in China, and I wanted to talk to you about the biographical, and you alluded to this at the beginning of our conversation about the biographical nature of some of the stories given your history. But I wanted to talk to you specifically about the stories where Danny is the narrator.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just trying to think of which story. So the city, uh, the girl from Dongguan, probably, physics problem, bicycle. Sorry,
Right?
that's the bicycle thief, and
Bicycle
the lover. Yeah, I think each of those stories
more than.
I probably have. I mean, it may not be obvious, but uh, yeah. I mean, I lived in China for a long time, right? So uh, I like. I don't really have any preconceived notion of what fiction should be like, and what is considered. I'm sort of writing what I myself appreciate. So
Mhm.
I also read a lot of biographical fiction and fictionalized, life biographies. And for example, like the comics I was talking about, these are biographical comics. And
Mhm.
so, um, yeah, I mean, I would be writing about very close to, what I saw and what I was experiencing in many of those stories. Yeah. And there are stories in there that, I didn't adopt that specific perspective and use that character, but uh, they're more or less based on on my own experiences as well.
Mhm. I those are all the questions I have. Kaylee, I know we had a weird minute. I think we lost a few attendees, but does anyone else have any questions? No. So I'm excited to talk to you about what you're working on now, what you're working on next.
Yeah, sure. So I have Wolsak and Wynn has the anthology coming out, which you mentioned before,
Mhm.
and uh, there's also the reissue of my first book, which you mentioned in the bio, um, and that's really the two things I have here. And then I am doing writing occasionally, not very much right at the moment, but I'm hoping to do more. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um,
How can you
I don't
talk
know. I
about
have yeah.
the reissue of your first book as the comrade? Was
Yeah,
there a did you in your mind do some, or did you do revisions and want to reissue it in a different way, or
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So what happened was I I wrote that in 2017 um, in China, and I was looking for a publisher, and I found a Toronto publisher.
Mhm.
Uh, they took it in 2018, and but they're a novella publisher, and so uh, I actually had to cut it down um, to fit the requirements for that, and
Mhm.
then. Uh, and then so I was thinking, oh, it'd be nice to be able to reissue it in its full length. And then I also did make other changes as well. And so, uh, yeah, that's sort of where and then obviously Noelle from Wolsak and Wynn was able to take it. And so I was I was asking and begging her to take it because, uh, I want to be able to have it in its original form. So,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
that's fantastic. I'm excited for that. would be nice for you and for readers to see the original story as you meant to tell it. I am so grateful for this conversation. I really am. I loved this collection. I loved sitting here and talking to you about it. I'm not sure if I missed anything, if there's something about writing this collection that you'd love to talk about, that you wished I had asked, I'm happy to go there. But if you don't,
I it was wonderful to write, and I was so grateful to Jen, my editor, and the press for taking it on. It's very difficult to uh, to get a publisher, especially like even in I mean, the small presses are, it takes so much work and so much effort, and so many different people to help out and to make it become a book and a
yeah,
reality. And there's so much out there that is worth publishing, and there's so many great writers. Uh, I'm so fortunate and lucky and honored to be part of that and to be able to have it out with Wolsak and Wynn.
yeah,
And they did such a wonderful job. I was just I was speechless. I was thinking everything with the book is perfect. Um, and I just got a little royalty slip in the mail yesterday.
oh my
Um,
gosh.
and I was thinking, I didn't even know what it was because I didn't get any royalty slips for my first book. I don't know why, but I didn't even know what it was. I was like, what are all these funny numbers here? And then I looked at it, I was like, wow, this is really amazing. So,
These are dollar
to go
signs,
from
dollar signs in front of these numbers. Good.
yeah. So it's been such a great experience.
Yeah, I'm excited. Wolsak and Wynn is one of our favorites for sure. Um, that is all we have. I can't believe that we're coming to the end. That hour went by very quickly. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it again. And thank you to everyone who joined and for everyone who's watching this video right now. We have a couple of events coming up in February. The first 30 is meeting on February 16th to talk to Denise Davey. And on February 26th, we're going to have our Junction Reads event with Margaret Sweatman and her novel, The Gunsmith's Daughter. And we aren't going to raffle off 2 copies like we normally do, because I feel like we lost some people. So I am going to send this video to all of the people who registered for our event, and anyone who shares the event. We will have a raffle, I think, or unless Kaylee can come up with something more innovative than that. Dan, thank you again. I really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Allison. Thank you, Kaylee.
Thanks.
Thank you,
And
everyone, for coming.
thanks. Yeah, thanks to everyone else. Have a great day. Bye.
Good night.